to the podcast, everyone. My name is Germaine Washington, and I'm your host. So for today's podcast, it's all about how to start a podcast and also to help us name this brand new podcast and win $250. The way that you're going to do that is you're going to watch the podcast and you're going to send in what you think the name of the podcast should be to germaine.washington@hccs.edu. And you need to know that this podcast is all about helping young entrepreneurs as well as entrepreneurs who are in school, because we're trying to figure out how to navigate both your business goals and your school goals at the same time. So, with that being said, I'd like to introduce our guests today, Mr. Chris Holmes and Kimberly Penn. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I just wanted to say to you, Chris, first, that you have a podcast.
Yes.
You're a millennial.
Yes.
And I want to know, and I think our audience all want to know, how did you start the podcast? What was your first thing that you did to get the podcast going?
So the one thing I will say when it came to podcasting, I was completely new to everything, just like everybody else. But I follow a lot of different influencers and people, especially on social media. And my first introduction into it came from a person by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk, or by Gary V. So he was talking about, yeah, you need to do this, because he's a person that's always into newer technology and what's trending, so he can catch up. And so I was like, podcasting, what is this? And so after watching that video, of course, he used one of the biggest things that we all use, Google and things like that, and just got into it. But the main thing when it comes to podcasts is just make sure you have the video or the audio file, and then you just release them to different platforms and things.
A different platform. So before we go into more details on the mechanics of the podcast, what is the name of your podcast?
Next Level Thinking.
And what is your podcast about?
So I labeled it that way, and it's Next Level Thinking because I keep it broad for a reason, because my podcast is about telling everybody's story, from teachers, coaches, young entrepreneurs, speakers, a couple of millionaires, because I believe everybody is a page in the book of life. But as you listen to my podcast, guessing their stories, you get inspired. And one thing I've taken to heart is it's not always just my story, but it's everybody's story. So even if you can't pull something from my story, my guests may have something that you can pull from, learn from, to get you inspired, or maybe even think oh, it's not so hard, maybe I can do it too. And that's what it's all about.
Inspirational, motivational, all of those great things, right?
Much more.
Wow, that's amazing.
Gotta take it to the next level.
Interesting. Take it to the next level. So, how can people find your podcast? How do they find it? Where is it?
So it's on a lot of different platforms. Of course, if you want to keep it simple, just Google Next Level Thinking with my name, Chris Holmes. But if you look up Next Level Thinking with an exclamation mark, you'll be able to find it. You'll see the SP logo, and if you see that one is mine. So it's on, of course, Apple's podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all these other different platforms as well.
Okay, that's very nice. Okay, so I also have Miss Kimberly Penn. She's an entrepreneur in residence, and she is brand new to Houston Community College, where she is working with the Director of Student Innovation at Southwest College, and he'll be coming on a little bit later. Yes. And they're all about helping students. So when you think about us starting this new podcast, and we want to focus on our students who are not all young. Some of our students are non-traditional. What do you think our podcast should look like? Because when we get ready to choose a person who wins the prize for naming it, I want them to really understand what we're all about. And you've been one of the people that's helping put the podcast together. So what do you think about how we're going to put this podcast out there for our students?
Very good. I'm excited that we have the podcast, and I'm looking forward to subscribing to your podcast. I'm an avid follower of a number of podcast series.
Much appreciated.
Absolutely. So for HCC, I think that ultimately our students will tell us the direction that the podcast series needs to go in. But to get started, because we need a launching pad, so to speak, is to look at how to monetize a podcast and to help people flush out what they're doing in their life professionally, personally even, that could be interesting, sometimes inspiring, maybe funny, something like a DIY almost in terms of different aspects, talk about politics, business mechanics, and pretty much anything. Mm-hmm. And HCC certainly represents a gambit of different subjects in terms of the degrees we offer, certificates, and so our student body is reflective of any number of topics that can be included on a podcast.
Very interesting. So when you talked about subscriptions,
Yes.
let's talk about monetizing, because when you have a podcast, you want to earn some income from that, right? Mm-hmm. So Chris, tell me, how do you earn money from your podcast? Tell our students and our faculty and staff out there, how do we do that?
Well, it's just like one of those things. It just depends up to you, and it's being creative and thinking outside the box. And now, of course, the monetize, that's your personal choice or whoever you make, because there's some people that just want to put out great information. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to monetizing, this kind of reminds me of, because my mentor talks about this, but also my personal experience, mm-hmm. is you use your podcast to provide a lot of great value in giving. And as you give people a lot of value, they tune in. And then that's when you can pretty much drop a link into, put them into your database where you can pretty much have contact to them. Right. And if you want to sell them a product and things like that, you can go from there. Also, you have a way you can do advertising. I notice this a lot. So if you have a sponsor, they're usually in the beginning or the end, and they pay to be to catch that traffic onto the podcast and much more. Some people just use that and talk about, let's say, expertise in different skills and things like that, and from people learning from the podcast the valuable information, they may want to contact you for an individual one-on-one session. Mm-hmm. So it just really depends. There's so many different ways you can monetize. So you're saying it's
multiple ways
yes.
to get income from your podcast.
Yes.
You can have subscription, as Kimberly just discussed. Mm-hmm. You can also have advertisers on your podcast, mm-hmm. and you can have people who do one-on-one where you gain money from, I guess, their interest level and what you're talking about if you want to do one-on-one mentoring. Mm-hmm. So for all the people out there who want to have podcasts, these are some of the ways that you can earn income from your particular
One
podcast.
thing I will say is just make sure, if the key thing is find a way to drop them to a landing page for your database. Because if you have their information like emails, because no one leaks email, let's be honest. That way you always have a way to contact them.
Okay. Well, when we return from our break, we'll continue this conversation with Chris Holmes, and we'll bring in Ravi Brahmbhatt. He is the director of the Student Innovation Center at Southwest Campus for Houston Community College. And we're just going to continue talking about how to start a podcast, inspirational topics that you may be interested in for a podcast, and continuously thinking out of the box on how we can earn from our podcast, because we are entrepreneurs and we do want to continue to figure out ways to earn income. So we'll be right back.
Meet Lisa. When she's not moving to a Zydeco beat, she's making moves towards a better job with a nursing degree from Houston Community College. Ça c'est bon, Lisa. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
Did you know that Houston Community College has the largest enrollment of online community college students in the United States? Hi, I'm Paul Calhoun. The HCC Online College proudly enrolls over 20,000 students. We offer more than 30 online degree and certificate programs, as well as online student services, including admissions, advising, counseling, and technical support. HCC Online College, anywhere, anytime. For more information, visit our website, hccs.edu/online.
Welcome back to our Unnamed podcast. And I want to welcome back Chris Holmes and Ravi Brahmbhatt, who is, and let me get this correct, Director of Student Innovation and Entrepreneurship for the Southwest Campus of Houston Community College. Thank you so much, Ravi, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so as we're going to continue our conversation, I wanted to remind everyone out there that in order to see these podcasts and download it, you can go to hccs.edu/podcast to download the podcast. And as we move on, so Ravi, what are some resources that you have at your campus that you think will help our students and young entrepreneurs turning their business ideas into actual businesses?
So at all of the Center for Entrepreneurships, so we have 3 Center for Entrepreneurships at the college. At all of these centers, we offer different services, everything from mentoring, just to come in, talk about a personalized path for you. It doesn't matter what degree plan you're following. Entrepreneurship is so broad that any student with any skills could start anything. So we offer mentoring services to sit down and talk about, what would your path look like if you were an audio video engineering student. There's a path for you to entrepreneurship, especially digital entrepreneurship, something we're doing here. If you are a health science student, well, guess what? There's a path for you as well. So mentoring, with the entrepreneur residents like Kimberly Penn, David Regenbaum, and Ned Mueller at the centers. The other things we offer is access to the startup community. So coming into the office, having a conversation with us, we may give you, resources, events. We may even have tickets to certain events. So groups like the Impact Hub, the ION, the Station Houston, the Canon. These are hubs where a lot of digital entrepreneurs meet. So our students get access to those by coming to us and us taking them there. We also have competitions to give a place or a platform for students to test their ideas and see, hey, is there a market for this? Do people want this type of service? So through competitions, they can find out the level of interest from the community. And we also host hackathons in which you may not have ideas, but you want to just, you want a problem to solve for. So we've got plenty of problems in our world, and you've got some skills, you've got some time. We host these events to bring these students together. So those are some of the services and resources at the college for our 100,000 plus students. So
Nice.
we're available to them.
So not only do you do hackathons, you also did inventathons, and tell our audience a little bit about what they do, because it's more than solving a problem. They solve these problems, and then they come up with major ways of solving the problem that turn into possible business ideas. Is that correct?
Yeah, so our Inventathon is a hackathon. We just branded Inventathon because we want to invent something. The challenge that usually, we have a lot of problems in the world, and we pick a theme and we say, look, we're going to dedicate 24 hours to solving this problem with a bunch of smart people in the room, and everybody has something to add value. It's not just all the smart, high GPA students. It's also the digital maker, the creative person, the one that could really tell a good story, not just do the math and science behind it. So we get just random, diverse groups of people together. We give them some sort of an inspiration, get some keynotes to come out and talk about a theme or a topic and why it's important. And then we give them all the tools that they need to build and make. I think, what you're doing here with the new podcast is now you're producing something. You're a maker, right? Mm-hmm. You've created digital content right here that can inspire other people. Well, the hackathon is similar. We want the students to create something, and then once they built it, whether they commercialize it or not, most students don't. They're still interested in finishing their degrees. Their parents don't want to get them dropped out of college. They want them to finish their degree. So all those ideas sit in the back burner. They'll work on it later. But the point with the hackathon is to get more Houston youth to make and produce rather than just to consume and leech as the IT world has.
Absolutely. And that is why we're having this podcast. It's because we want our students to know all of the resources and all of the opportunities available to them. And we want this podcast to be a podcast where they can tune in to learn about all of the resources that are designed specifically for them. Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, you're a millennial, correct? Mm-hmm. How old are you?
28.
You're 28 years old, you have a podcast, you're an entrepreneur. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is how do you balance all of the things that you do and still have sanity?
Well, it comes with having like a nice mentor. By the way, my mentor is like you. I met my mentor by speaking, so I do a whole lot of different things because I have my podcast, of course, is the way I give great value information, but I have a production platform which serves the community and helps build dreams, that story and things like that. Like our motto is helping you capture your dream or make your dream reality, and the podcast is a part of that. But the way that I help stay stable with everything is you got to have like-minded people. You know, like my mentor, he's a millionaire, and we all get on conference calls and things like that because we, as entrepreneurs, you know, especially if you want the high incomes and things like that, you have to be able to solve problems. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how you get paid the big bucks. Right. But if you have a big problem, you know how to solve it.
And that knows about that.
So you have to be able to service the community in multiple ways and scale, and also just keep in line of having a strong circle, create systems. And the systems is like the biggest thing I will say. Of course, I feel like, you know, when you start to be learning a lot of new things, but system is the key thing. If you think about McDonald's or all these major franchises, they have systems in place. So it's organized, you know how to contact, it's structured, because if you're not have something organized or structured or have some kind of system, you're constantly like everywhere. Nothing's really getting done. You're not efficient and effective. So that's one thing I will say on it.
So we're probably going to get more into this on our next segment, but how did you get all of your equipment together to start your podcast? Where do you film your podcast? We're going to start talking about the mechanics of filming the podcast, because I'm sure our viewers out there are really interested to know. So just give me a brief overview. We're probably going to have to bring it all into the next segment, but tell me a little bit about that.
The way I'll quickly answer this is there's no limitations and there's no minimum. Even if it starts with you just taking out your phone and just using the voice recorder, that's content. Even if you have the expenses and the money to get the big equipment like this, that's great. The main thing I will say is actually doing it. That's the main thing.
The first step is starting.
Yes, starting. Because too many people be like, I don't have this, I don't have the budget, I don't have the skills and things like that. But one thing I will say is just do it, just like Nike. Take action.
Okay. Well, the Entrepreneurial Initiatives Department has so many unique opportunities and resources for our students, including this contest that we'll be having for you to help us name our podcast. The podcast will be focused on our students and young entrepreneurs, and you have a chance to win $250. You must submit your name by the deadline of January 30th, 2020. And you must submit it to germaine.washington@hccs.edu. We'll be right back.
This is Mac. She's ready to build herself a house and a business. But first, she's building her resume with a construction certification from Houston Community College. HCC, for everyone, anytime. This is Daniel. On his way to becoming a rock star, he got burned, literally. So he changed his tune and his career, and he's starting at Houston Community College. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
this last segment, we're going to continue to talk about how you develop your podcast, because I know all of you out there want to know. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts of how we get our podcast going. We're going to continue speaking with Ravi and Chris about that. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, Chris, you have the podcast, and we at HEC, this is our first podcast for our Entrepreneurial Initiatives Department. Tell me how you got your equipment, how you started, where you film at, all of that. We want to know.
So with that said, I'm going to go back to my previous and kind of go a little bit further in detail. There is no minimum required. Honestly, I will say this: there's an app called Anchor. So if you don't have the funds for like a lot of the equipment and you're just starting out, you just want to get your message going, Anchor is a great way to use. You can easily use your phone and it automatically distributes into multiple platforms. So like iTunes, Spotify, and all that, if you don't have the funds for that, you can start from there. Now, of course, when I started my podcast, I just took my DSLR camera and I took the video content and put it onto like the other platforms like Facebook. But I have like a audio software called like Adobe Premiere. I just strapped the MP3 off of that and then upload it into these other platforms for Spotify and things like that. Another one source, if you want to get started, like Podomatic. That's another great source to start out for free and things like that. So there's really no minimum. Just the main thing is getting started. And of course, you have all these different things. You can find your equipment from like Amazon, Google, and things like that, and much more. But I'm still strong on that. The main thing is getting started, because I feel like too many people, especially nowadays, don't start because they don't think they have the funds for it. And they may get intimidated when you have the big mics and things. Of course, these are nice. I will say these are nice. But don't get intimidated not to start because you don't have the funds to.
That's good information. Our students need to know that they don't need to have a lot of money to start their podcast. You can start your podcast at any time. So what made you decide to start the podcast?
So like I said earlier with Gary Vee, of course, I was doing entrepreneurship ever since high school and creative, like writing poetry and things like that. But like one thing I noticed as my journey of like reaching great people and then inspiring them with what I'm doing and just like taking that leap of faith and taking chances on myself, people were always coming up and saying like, hey, like tell me about this. Like I started getting asked questions. I wasn't expecting this in the beginning. I was just like, chasing the goals, the dreams, and much more, and trying to get to a certain stage, set high expectations. But I didn't expect for people to be coming around asking me questions. So it was like a surprise. I was like, what? So like as it's constantly kept building and things for and much more, people were like, maybe you should do something like either teach and things like that. And that's when I heard about the Gary Vee, and he was talking about podcasts, and I was like, let me try this out, and it's been going ever since.
So speaking of podcasts, Ravi, tell me about your online radio that you were speaking of, and let our viewers know about that.
Sure. So to Chris's point, you got to bootstrap and you got to do this thing. So my first experience with podcasts about 12 years ago. We started an AM radio, a Saturday show for 3 hours. Those were the original live podcast, right? Because you're talking on air and people listening. And then, it was very costly to do so. We ran it for about a year. It was an ethnic radio show. And from 3 hours, every Saturday, after about a year, we converted it into an online radio. And, I literally just used Winamp, Shoutcast plugins to start broadcasting 24/7 off of a computer and good internet speeds. And then you got what's known as a restreamer. Voscast is something that I use even today. $14 a month. They would restream what I send to, unlimited users. So for now, I guess 12 years, that radio stream is on. We have music playing 24/7. Every hour, on average, there's 50 people listening globally. And it's an ethnic radio show, right? So our goal is to promote the culture that I'm from. So, but it all started literally with free tools on the web and the laptop and the internet, the computer with internet access. And if you're on campus, I don't know, a lot of students don't realize, but HCC campuses have a gig up and down. Those are extremely fast upload speeds. 1 gig. So if, and it's open, it's free. So come to the library, sit down, or find a quiet study room. And when you need to upload
Them big files.
those big files,
That's where you go.
Well, I need to upload this right now.
This is
vlogs.
valuable information. This is
Yeah.
That
valuable
takes forever
information.
if you ain't got
So
the
just
speed.
bring it to the
Yes.
college and upload it there, because the college does have a lot of things that could help our students, dabble into this digital entrepreneurship space. So.
This is valuable information. So, in addition to that, what services or things that you would like for people to know about you? This is an opportunity for you to tell our audience out there about you and what you have, and if they need something from you or you have to offer. What do you would like to say to the people out there about you?
All right, cool. So I'm gonna keep it simple because the company I'll actually give a lot of different services and things like that, but it's a production company for providing like photography, video, audio, and things like the podcast and things like that. So for example, on the personal needs, let's see, you need graduation pictures, weddings, event coverage, and things like that. You have that where our services come in my mind. Now on the business side, now let's say you need a corporate headshot, help with that content branding, the marketing, and things like that, and just creating out that content to give valuable information to the audience so they can see that you're the skilled person, things like that. This is where our services come into hand. So we hit on the personal and business side, and it goes back to my motto is like helping you create the dream and make your dream reality.
That's nice. And how long have you had your podcast again?
The funny thing is just 2 years, but I already have
That's
like
nice.
140 something episodes.
That's wonderful. So when you were 26 years old, you had your podcast. A 26-year-old just started his podcast, so you guys can do it too. And Ravi, are there any events or upcoming things you want to let all the people know about so that in case they want to be a part of it?
Sure, absolutely. So in 2020, right, the spring semester, we'll have the Ideas Pitch Competition, in which students you have a platform to share your ideas to make the world better, social impact, things to change policy, things to make education better, or come up with a new tech. We are going to give out $5,000 as the top 3 prizes, totaling to $5,000 for the top 3 places. And we will also have an inventathon where we'll give out about $750 of prize money. We will also have a code fest to learn a little bit about programming and coding. And we are planning to do more collaborations around the digital entrepreneurship space. So we're bringing out events like the Black Girls Code. We're doing work with Women Who Code. And then hopefully we could do some more student clubs, activities with them. Those aren't planned yet, but one of my initiatives is to get more student clubs involved. So Chris, I'm definitely going to ask you to come out and share your
Wonderful.
experience.
Love
to the
putting
group.
collaborations together.
Great, appreciate it. And I want
Thank you,
to do this.
Ravi. Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but we're out of time, and I know these conversations, they just get so interesting. But I want to thank you both so much for being on our podcast. Remember, you can download the podcast at hccs.edu/podcast. But do not forget, come and join us for our contest. You can do Germaine.Washington at hccs.edu for $250 to help us name this wonderful new podcast. Thanks for watching.